President Trump considers commuting the prison sentence of former Governor Rod Blagojevich, and politicians are headed to the state fair. We'll talk about it next on Capitol View. Welcome to Capitol View, the program where we talk about state issues, sometimes federal issues, and how they just might affect your life. I'm Bernie Schoenburg from the State Journal-Register. The state fair is going on. Rod Blagojevich is in the news. Interesting time in Illinois as usual. Here to discuss it with me, Kent Redfield is back. He is a professor emeritus of political science at University of Illinois Springfield. Welcome back, Kent.
Good to be here.
Also back, Jerry Nowicki of Capitol News, Illinois. Down at the Capitol, Jerry, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Bernie.
Okay, well, we say at the beginning of the show, or I do, federal, state. Well, we have a federal state situation if the President of the United States, President Trump, talking again, he did it about a year ago and nothing happened, but talking again about possibly commuting the sentence of former Governor Rod Blagojevich. President apparently told reporters on Air Force One that he thinks 18 years was way too much. It's more than it was because the judge actually gave Rod Blagojevich 14 years for his corruption convictions. But some people also think that's way too much, and of course the president is taking off on the prosecutors. Kent, your thoughts? You've lived through the Blagojevich era, as did us. I don't know if we can predict what the president will do, but we can certainly talk about the reaction here.
Yeah, and I think for people that outside of Illinois that really didn't have a sense of the Blagojevich years, there was a tremendous amount of corruption. He did not go to prison for bragging over the phone, as the president would suggest. And while that may, I'm not sure what the president's reasons for getting involved with this are, but I think you're going to get a very negative reaction pretty much universally in terms of both citizens and politicians in Illinois to the idea that we should somehow rehabilitate Rod Blagojevich's image, particularly when we're talking about, as we all of us seem to be, corruption in Illinois in terms of other cases involving the Chicago City Council and the state legislature.
Yeah. And I guess it depends if you say rehabilitate image or just that maybe 14, he has already served, he went in 2012, so he served, I think he's about 7 years already. But, it kind of depends how you look at it.
Well, we haven't heard a lot of a contrite Rod Blagojevich apologizing for his crimes. I missed that if it happened.
Jerry, you have worked on this story some. I know you talked to Leader Durkin, leader of House Republicans, Jim Durkin. What are you hearing?
Right. So Leader Durkin yesterday, he said he was kind of surprised, but it sort of fit into the pattern of the erratic politics that this president partakes in. But he said what was really troubling about the whole thing is the message that it sends that corruption isn't that bad. And like you said, Kent, that despite the problems that Illinois has had for years with corruption. And the other thing he said was that, Trump had called Comey, and Comey obviously didn't even prosecute
Jim Comey,
this,
the former head of the FBI.
but he said it was Comey and those sleazebags that essentially did this to Blagojevich rather than,
Right.
it being something that Blagojevich earned. And Durkin, he said, it fits in the pattern of Trump aiming his rhetoric at people who are distrustful of federal government and the FBI. And
it's kind of the grievance that the FBI has been after me. And Mark Brown, a colleague of ours, works longtime columnist at the Chicago Sun-Times, did a column saying these were not sleazebags, these were good prosecutors. I don't think Comey was involved at all and may not have even been in that position at the FBI at the time. And he talked about the prosecutors in Chicago and the good reputations that they had, et cetera, et cetera. So, and of course, some of the things Rod Blagojevich did, there were audio tapes of him or talking to his people about making sure we get some campaign money from the guy that runs the Children's Hospital in Chicago before we let the state money go there. That kind of thing really got under people's got on people's nerves and beyond.
And this is a governor who learned his politics in terms of his father-in-law and a Chicago city ward, where nothing government does comes without a price, and that you routinely expect to make money and be rewarded for doing the things that you're supposed to do as a public official.
Interesting. Well, you're saying all these things. His father-in-law, of course, is former Alderman Richard Mell,
Sure.
Dick Mell. Dick Mell's daughter, Rod Blagojevich's wife, is Patty Blagojevich. And one of the things that she has done over the last year, we know that Rod Blagojevich has a relationship with President Trump because Rod Blagojevich, I think it was after he was indicted, certainly it was after he was impeached, did this kind of national tour of things. And one of the ways he got national exposure to make himself look like a nicer guy or whatever, he appeared on The Celebrity Apprentice. So, they were showing on TV this week pictures of Donald Trump saying you're fired when he didn't know all of the names of the dormitories in Harry Potter, I think, or something. And we also learned that Rod Blagojevich couldn't type very well because when he had to use the computer himself on the air, it's as if he needed help. But Patty Blagojevich, since then, has also used the media. She has gone, at least more of this before the first round of the president talking about this and then backing off. She had gone on Fox News some to complain about the federal investigators, saying basically, President Trump, just like you are being wronged by these people, my husband was wronged by these people. And he did, in his comments this week, President Trump, say that Patty Blagojevich is like a wonderful person, and she is someone to listen to. So again, I'm not sure where that goes. A year ago, when Illinois had 7 Republican members of the U.S. House, they wrote a joint letter to the president saying, please don't let Rod Blagojevich out. Again, as you said, Kent, and as you said, Jerry, this will give the impression that fighting corruption in Illinois isn't as serious as it should be. Now there are only 5 members on the Republican side in the U.S. House after 2 seats flipped in the 2018 election, but those 5 members reissued that letter and a new statement saying, please, President Trump, read this again and don't let him out. So it's that's where we're at. We have, I will say also that there are some who think 14 years was too much, and one of them is Dick Durbin, who has said, U.S. Senator from Springfield, said he wouldn't mind really if the president did this. A rare point where he might be okay with something President Trump does.
And if you want to frame this in terms of compassion and how long he has been in prison, that's fine. But it also has to come with an acknowledgement that these were serious crimes, that public corruption is both a critical issue, and it's not something you trivialize or romanticize. It wasn't bragging on the phone. This was trying to shake down all different parts of state government and private citizens for personal gain. And that's so it. You can certainly approach this from a position of compassion, but that has to be come with it. It has to be an acknowledgement. These are serious crimes. This is a serious problem, and not to normalize it or romanticize it.
And interestingly, you mentioned Dick Mell, but as I recall, it was Dick Mell who had a fight with his son-in-law over state regulation of a landfill where Mell was a friend with the owner. And Mell ended up, while on vacation, I believe in Florida, telling Chicago media, somebody, that, well, at Rod, he's demanding like $25,000 from people who, if they want to get on a state commission. And that kind of helped open the whole investigation. He helped bring the investigation on his son-in-law.
Yeah, and the other thing Leader Durkin said that stuck out to me was it sends the message that if you become a folk hero in the eyes of the president, that you're above the law at this point, if Trump were to commute this sentence.
Rod Blagojevich is certainly an Elvis Presley fan, and if anybody would call him a folk hero, I don't think he would mind, but we'll see where things go. And it's always been the case, and the president mentioned that, Rod had a couple of children, his daughters, and now they're getting older and older, and he's supposed to be in prison until 2024. We'll see if that happens or if something else happens between now and then.
We should point out that Governor Pritzker at the fair yesterday too said, he should stay where he is.
Right. It wasn't like 14 is great, I think, but he said, he got sentenced to prison. That's where he should be. And I think he said serve out his term. Did he not?
Yeah.
Very good. Well, speaking of The fair, this coming week, we will see Wednesday, because we now have a Democratic governor, it's Governor's Day. Thursday will be Republican Day. The big event on Wednesday will be Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the U.S. House, coming to speak to the Democratic County Chairs breakfast at a hotel. It's a ticketed event. They make a lot of money off of it. I'm not sure yet if the Democrats are having any particular rally at the fair. The Republicans the next day have a leader on the Republican side, Steve Scalise. He's from Louisiana. He is known, unfortunately, partly because when Republicans were practicing on a baseball field a couple years ago, getting ready for a charity game in Washington, a crazed shooter from Belleville, Illinois, who was worried about health care apparently and liked Bernie Sanders, started shooting at them. He was killed, but Steve Scalise was hurt very badly. He has since recovered and is back at work. Kent, you've watched many of these fairs, and it's an interesting choice that, first of all, you got Nancy Pelosi on the Democratic side, who a lot of Republicans love to hate, and is leading the charge, and has had her own problems with her own caucus. And then Steve Scalise, who is an outsider of Illinois, who is headlining the Republican Day in Illinois. Your thoughts on these things?
Well, yeah, I think the choice of Pelosi is an interesting choice. She is not a very popular person among Republicans. She certainly is, compared to the northeastern Illinois, where you've got a lot more moderates and Democrats. Central Illinois is not necessarily a place that again, where she would get a lot of favorable opinion. But this is an event that is focusing on the Illinois Democrats, and for whatever we think about the state's demographics, Democratic power in Illinois rests in northeastern Illinois, and downstate is becoming less and less Democratic. And so it's not, that we think of the state fair as a central Illinois event, and it generally is in terms of who comes to the state fair. But this is a chance for the party to, build up the faithful. We're getting people there. We want to energize them. We've taken over the U.S. House. We own all of Illinois state government. This is rallying the faithful and the team and all of that. And we're not trying to sway voters in central or southern Illinois. The Republicans have there's not in terms of a state politician who's a Republican, there's just not a likely choice.
They don't have any U.S. senators right now from Illinois, and they do have their leaders of the House and Senate, but they have severe minorities in those in both of those houses, and
so it doesn't it is a sign of a party that is in a rebuilding stage, that is was severely wounded by the 2018 election, and it certainly this is a very popular and sympathetic figure in terms of just in general, not just Republicans, and so that will play well. It will get good publicity.
Meaning Steve Scalise,
sure,
right?
Steve Scalise.
Yeah. It is interesting, Jerry. I know you at least probably watch peripherally the 13th Congressional District and Rodney Davis. He mentions Nancy Pelosi almost as much as anybody when he's running against probably Betsy Dirksen Londrigan. She has to, of course, get through the primary, but there's no other Democrats running against her yet, and the primary's in March, and of course we're looking at the 2020 election. But I asked Rodney Davis, what do you think of Nancy Pelosi coming? Well, it just shows how liberal the Democratic Party is. On the other hand, after President Trump, after some national shootings, some negative publicity that President Trump has generated for some comments that he's made, which you could say at various times for various things, but Democrats seem perhaps more united. Any effect you see in like the 13th Congressional District with these people coming? Scalise is clearly a friend of Rodney Davis too. He's been to Springfield before to campaign for him, to raise money for him.
I hadn't thought of that, but it would help Rodney Davis and his ads to tie the two together like he's always tried to do. I know Rodney Davis was actually on that basebal field with Steve Scalise.
He was at bat when the shooting started.
Is that right?
And talks a lot about how he had to go into the dugout and then hid behind cars and saw his friend, lying
Yeah.
on the ground, severely hurt.
He came out to video cameras with those same clothes on, which was kind of powerful at the time.
Right.
It'll be interesting. I haven't really covered any of these fair days.
Oh, is this going to be your
before.
first political days?
This will be the first.
Welcome
so,
to the club. They're really hard to cover, people. But anyway, it's just there's so much going on all day long.
Right. So it'll be interesting. I'm looking forward to see how it turns out. I know Pelosi is certainly a polarizing figure, even within her party. There's a lot of the more liberal, younger crowd that doesn't particularly care for her.
Right.
And then the Republicans want to say she's this liberal wacko. But yeah, so we'll see how it plays out.
And it'll be interesting to hear. And again, I don't think Illinois. I know, Kent, you've talked about how moderate the politics in Illinois is over time. I don't think we're a state where you've got a lot of people really strongly pushing for impeachment, although there are some members of Congress in the Chicago area who have said that should happen. Clearly, that's not like Betsy Londrigan isn't talking that at this point, other than say, let's see where investigations go, because this, Sangamon County is part of the 13th. Sangamon County was a Trump county. Most of Illinois, I think 90 Illinois counties went for Trump in 2016.
Yeah, and I think you clearly can expect the Davis campaign is going to use, have video and, that they will use in ads to tie Lonergan to Pelosi, right, and to reflect Davis's association with Scalise and very positive, nonpartisan kind of we've got to unify the country. We've got to get a handle on our problems, and so I think that it plays. It's better for the 13th district than it is statewide. Saying that the Democratic Party is, leaning to the left, gets you votes in. As saying that, it's that may be a bad thing in Central Illinois. It's not necessarily a bad thing in the suburbs in the city of Chicago.
Well, we'll see where it goes. The 13th, of course, we talk about that race a lot because it was within 1 point 2 years ago, and the district was actually drawn to go either way. It has a lot of rural territory, which tends to be more Republican, but it also has like 8 college campuses where you get more of a concentration, including Champaign-Urbana, of Democratic strength. So it's a very interesting district, and we're going to hear a lot about that race between now and next year. We do also come at this, and one thing that has kind of brought many in the country together, although there are still differences with the president and others, about a couple of mass shootings in Dayton and in El Paso, more than 30 people killed. There's been some talk of what should be done about guns. Illinois has, when Governor Pritzker was new, he signed a law left over from the legislature last time, calling for state certification of gun shops in Illinois, but a story just came out in the Chicago Tribune noting that the rules are not yet in place, and even though that law is supposed to be in effect, things are going slow. And as far as what else the state can do, a lot of it should be a federal issue, and Governor Pritzker said, I think, that he had talked to his staff about this, but we haven't seen anything concrete at this point as far as what the state will do, if anything, other than urge federal action.
Yeah, we have a concealed carry law that was a compromise in terms of when you can carry, where you can carry. We don't have open carry in Illinois. We have a red flag law on the books. We have Ford cars.
And a red flag law, of course, allows people to go to authorities and say, hey, I think this person is dangerous, and then have a judge declare them dangerous and get their guns taken away, which is the same thing.
And then deal with it in terms of due process, rather than having go through a due process, a court filing, and then and then an adjudication, and then take the guns away. So there's not a lot. We have limited assault weapons ban in terms of Cook. It's more regional in terms of Cook County. It's unlikely. A lot of things they're talking about doing nationally, or how does Texas need to change its laws or not change its laws. Those conversations really aren't all that relevant to Illinois. So it turns out, given what's happened under both the legislature working under Governor Quinn, and then now under Governor Blagojevich.
Or Brown or Pritzker.
Yeah, well, we've, we've gotten to the point where there's not much that, dramatic that you can do in terms of Illinois state law.
Yeah, and of course our federal legislators are talking about it. Rodney Davis, for example, says red flag law, which a lot of Republicans are saying is a good idea nationally. And as we tape this, I heard President Trump again saying he wants further background checks. And Rodney Davis has said the background check bill that was passed by the House and is awaiting action in the Senate federally was really a show bill and didn't really do much. And you're talking about if you sell they want to make you get a background check if you sell a gun to your cousin or your nephew, and you shouldn't, whatever. So there are certainly differing views about what will work and what will help.
And we have to be clear that you cannot nationally mandate that Texas have a red flag law. That has to be something done by the Texas legislature.
Right. Unless there are national incentives to do it, like you won't get, like they did with the the highway. You can't get highway dollars unless you have a 21-year-old law for alcohol.
Yeah, you can encourage them, but that's we're not talking about this is something that has to be handled state by state, absent any kind of political will to deal with this nationally.
Okay, well, we were talking about corruption earlier, so let's go back to that a little, or at least alleged corruption. Tom Cullerton is a state senator, Democrat of Villa Park. He is a cousin, I think a distant cousin of Senate President John Cullerton. He was recently charged within the last 2 weeks with federal crimes, saying that he was employed for a few years by the Teamsters when he used to be a Teamster, but did little or no work for the money, and in pay and benefits, I think it was over $200,000. And he denies that this is a problem. There's a Teamster leader in Chicago who also is in legal trouble named John Colley, C-O-L-I. And Cullerton's defense is Colley is calling me out just to protect himself and help him. And then in the last week, we learned that Cullerton was removed as head of the Labor Committee, chairman of the Labor Committee in the Senate, and named head of the Veterans Affairs Committee. Jerry, some people are probably not happy about that, but it's an interesting, innocent till proven guilty is clearly being said by many folks.
So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. What's also interesting to me is how this falls into a line of other investigations and revelations about, ComEd. I think it was ComEd, a lobbyist.
If some of their lobbyists who, some of their people who have lobbied for Commonwealth Edison had like homes or offices raided by feds within the last couple of months at least.
Former Chicago.
And some of these are friends with Mike Madigan, and some of these people gave money to a former Madigan staffer who had to leave that employ because of alleged harassment of another campaign worker who complained about it in the Me Too era. So yeah, we don't know exactly what's going on, do we? Things are swirling a little bit.
So I'm hesitant to speculate at this point, who's going to be charged with what and whatnot, but there seems to be a crackdown on types of corruption in Illinois. How far it goes, who knows at this point? But like we were talking about earlier, what does the Blagojevich commutation say about that? And in this case.
Okay.
Yeah, and this clearly shows that at least the northeastern Illinois U.S. Attorney and probably other we don't know if it's limited just to that jurisdiction, is being very aggressive about this, and that's normally when corruption gets prosecuted in Illinois. It does not involve state's attorneys and Illinois law enforcement and judicial. It involves the federal government.
Right, and part of the rollout of this is Ed Burke, who is like a long time, decades, like I think 50 years on the council.
Certainly.
In Chicago, was recently indicted. It's a little embarrassing. His wife, Ann Burke, is on the Illinois Supreme Court. He claims he's innocent, but he's lost some of his power overseeing stuff going on in the Chicago City Council. And this was a sea change, also with the new mayor of Chicago, who told him he should just quit, and he hasn't, of course.
Yeah, so it's interesting. You brought the Supreme Court connection. So Tom Cullerton's lawyer is the husband of a
Right. It's John Theis,
Tice,
T-H-E-I-S,
yeah,
Tice,
Tice.
And his wife Marianne is on the Illinois Supreme Court
Right.
also. Yeah. So
I mean,
it's a small state. Jerry, you were at the ribbon cutting of the state fair, is that
I
right?
was,
So
yeah.
was that the first one you've seen?
it was, yeah.
So
yeah.
just give me your impression, the main get. So you had the state fair queen, you had Jackie Joyner-Kersee, who is the Olympic athlete from East St. Louis, gold medal winner from Illinois. Are you believing the hype, or you think?
Well, I was lucky to cover what's going to be the best fair ever, according to everyone that
I've never
spoke
heard this
there.
before in about the
So,
35 of those I've seen or so.
yeah, I'm looking forward to going out there this week.
And on another light note, the butter cow this year was unveiled by the governor himself, which and along with John Sullivan, the former state senator and director of ag. The governor isn't always at that, but he was there, and the butter cow this year is wearing a hard hat, and there are construction cones around because the theme is building our future. Again, just at the end of the week, the governor was cutting the ribbon, I guess, on the newly renovated Coliseum where they have horse shows. Kent, they have done a lot of work on the fairgrounds, but there's plenty more to go.
Oh, it is, you know, some of these buildings are, in fact, one of the main Coliseum is still, they can't use it because it's very, you know, it's in danger of falling down, essentially.
Well, isn't that the one they just fixed?
Well, okay.
Yeah, that's all beautifully renovated, I think.
But
So,
it
yeah.
is an indication of how, you know, one more indication of how far we are behind in terms of maintenance. But I mean, they certainly are trying to make the fair more friendly. They are doing, you know, we have really good senior citizen rates, which I
Okay.
certainly appreciate.
And there you go. We're going to have to end with that. Kent Redfield, Jerry Nowicki, thank you for your discussion. I'm Bernie Schoenburg, thank you. And we'll see you next time on Capitol View.